Hi, everybody. Welcome back to NCIS Reports in the Field. We're here with Amanda Kopke once again. When you talk to agents as you're doing other things, you learn amazing cases that they worked. Amanda will talk about today the last case she ever worked with NCIS, and it is a memorable, historic case, the legendary case regarding Chris Kyle, the American sniper, and the murder investigation of Chris, and what went into that. The work with Amanda's work with the Texas Rangers, and she's going to talk about that today. Amanda, thanks for coming on the show once again.
Yeah,
Great
thanks
to
for
have
having
you.
me.
And let's talk about Chris Kyle. I think this is a really interesting story. So
Yeah,
tell me
it
about
was
how this happened.
it was the last big case I worked. The double homicide of Chris Kyle and Chad Littlefield happened on February 2nd of 2013. I was still on medical leave, and I came back to duty at beginning of March of 2013, and this was the first case I was handed, and said this is a big DoD interest case because obviously from the work Chris did as a sniper and how successful he was at his job. He had a bounty on his head from while he was overseas. So there was a big DoD interest to ensure that he wasn't taken out because of the bounty. And so I came on duty, received the case, and met with the Texas Rangers as they were the lead investigator on the case. I was the lead federal agent on the case and essentially the co-case. So all major interviews, Ranger Briley and I did together. So it was full circle for me from a career standpoint that my last big case was with DPS, and I originally started my first paid job was with Texas DPS as well. So it was neat.
Well, tell us what it's like working with Texas Rangers, because I mean they're a legendary law
Yeah.
enforcement, one riot, one ranger, which is kind of what NCIS is. So we had a show with Dave Watson, who's a Texan,
Yeah.
back a couple of years ago, and he talks about, well, this is one riot, one ranger, and Dave Hertberg. I'm sorry, I get my Daves mixed up, but Dave tells a story. We're sent to a ship by ourselves to
Yeah.
work a case, on whatever it could be. Tell us about what it's like working with Texas Rangers.
The Texas Rangers are obviously the most elite law enforcement in Texas. They are a fantastic group of criminal investigators, but just human beings in general.
Mhm.
I'm very good friends with several of them from that case to this day. Um, so, yeah, they are very black and white. They investigate and go by the way wherever the evidence takes them is where they
Yeah,
go,
yeah.
and there's no real gray area with them, which I appreciate because obviously I'm a pretty straight shooter as well. So it was fantastic working with them. They obviously had tons of rangers involved at the beginning of the case doing the crime scene, and some of the technology that they used to 3D map a crime scene, which was
Mhm.
incredible to see how they do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, they are fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed my time working with them.
Well, so tell us how this all went down as far as when you got the call about Chris Kyle and Chad Littlefield.
Yeah, so when it actually happened, I was trying to house hunt and I was like, "Oh, that's going to be a big case." Little did I know when I got back on duty, that was the first case I was given. Um, so I went through what we had, which was pretty preliminary. It was the agents before me on that pulled like service book records and stuff like that, but no actual joint investigative work had taken place with the Rangers yet. So I met with Ranger Briley. We went over what had been done up until that date when I came on board and kind of got a roadmap of going forward what we needed to do
Mhm.
investigatively. And then we divide and conquer and accomplished a lot of those investigative leads independently. And then any major interviews from that point forward, we tried to do together just for case continuity. And
Mhm.
he and I worked well off of each other. He, being the Texas Ranger, wanted to be good cop.
Yeah.
And I
Wearing
was
the white
always
hat,
the,
right?
yeah. Yeah. And everybody, when the Texas Rangers walk in, they have an aura about them and everybody
Yeah.
stops and pays attention.
Hmm.
So I was always the bad cop in interviews and interrogations, which was fine by me. It worked out
Sure,
well.
sure. That's awesome.
So so yeah, any major interviews we did together, and then the Parasites Nocturnal. So I was up at night, and
Mhm.
so I started listening to jail calls, and then I was getting all of the jail mail from the suspect. I'm not
Mhm.
going to say the suspect's name, today out of respect for the families, but also
Mhm.
because he was obsessed with fame. And I refuse to give him that little nugget of
Good.
having
We
his
won't
name
do that.
mentioned.
Good. We won't do that.
Yeah, so he's from this point forward just going to be the suspect.
Mhm.
We met with the family and talked about their concerns and anything that they thought needed to be investigated. We looked into seriously. One thing I want to touch on is, as an investigator, typically sometimes we're very focused on we need to get X, Y, and Z and move on. But it's
Mhm.
very important to remember that when you're talking to victims' families, they've lost a loved one, and there's very real human emotions
Mhm.
involved. And grief happens in various ways, and people grieve differently. So just be mindful of when you are talking to families that the human aspect is very key and can make or break your investigation ultimately.
Yeah,
We had a
good
great
points.
working relationship with both the Kyle and Littlefield families. I know that Chad's family felt like he was forgotten because it was dubbed the American Sniper trial, and every
Mhm.
when the news reported on it, it was always American Sniper, American Sniper. And
Mhm.
really they left Chad out of the conversation.
Yeah.
But ultimately two men were murdered brutally that day,
Mhm.
and both families and both victims deserve justice. And
Let's talk
so
about Chad real quick because
yeah,
nobody's ever heard about. I mean, they heard Chad maybe once or twice, but yeah, you're right.
yeah,
They focus on the American Sniper, Chris Kyle. So
yeah.
let's talk about Chad Littlefield. What was his um, what was his involvement in where and why was he there um, with the suspect and with Chris?
So Chad and Chris became good friends. They lived in the same community, were pretty close, and just struck up a friendship. And
Mhm.
so whenever Chris would go help certain veterans, Chad would go along with them.
Mhm.
Plus, it was good to always have somebody else along. So Chad was very good friends with Chris and wanted to help out that day. He had a passion for helping others. That was just the kind of person that Chad was. He
Mhm.
was deeply caring and had a soft spot for military and police officers
Mhm.
and wanted to do his part to help and give back. And
Yeah.
so he was right along with Chris that day.
Wow. And was he former military as well?
No,
Interesting. It's just
yeah,
wanted guys just wanted to help out vets who were in need.
yeah.
Wow.
Just a truly good human being with a very big heart.
Wow. And that's sad. So anyway, go ahead and so let's talk about um, how you got involved in the investigation, working with Texas Rangers, and also these interviews. What did you learn from them?
We learned a lot. So from the date of the homicide was February 2nd, 2013. Trial started on February 11th, 2015. So it was a solid 2-year investigation. What we learned a lot through the jail calls and the jail mail was the suspect's mentality,
Mhm.
a little bit toward motive, a lot of what he was looking for his defense, and he was really trying to play up the PTSD and the mental illness aspect.
Mhm.
However, the investigation revealed that was all malarkey and made up.
Mhm.
And he had issues, don't get me wrong. You don't kill two people in cold blood if you don't have some serious issues,
Yeah.
but it was not to the extent that he was claiming. So he through the investigation, it was learned that he was obsessed with fame, which is obviously why I'm not going to use his name today.
Mhm.
He also was revealed that he was telling like tall tales. And part of our investigation is through the service book records, we looked to see what he did in the Marines and where he served. And then we ended up
Mhm.
sending out several leads to interview people that served with him to see if any of these tall tales that he was telling actually occurred or not.
Mhm.
He tried to make himself out to be a Billy Badass in theater and was not. He was a small arms repairman and worked on small arms, so handguns, pistols, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
He was not working on any of the large artillery or large weaponry used by any kind of special forces.
Yeah.
One story that he told that occurred in Iraq was that he killed two people in one shot or one incident, and
Wow.
that was determined to be complete fabrication. So not only did we go back and interview people that he served with, part of our goal was we did a timeline, literally from the day he was born to the day of trial, with everything in between.
Yeah.
Went back to his elementary schools. We talked to his teachers to see what kind of student he was. We talked to neighbors. One of his neighbors was homeless and was up in the Metroplex in Dallas Fort Worth area, and I spent a lot of time hunting him down, trying to find him at different homeless shelters. Eventually
Mm.
located him, and he gave us some key information about the suspect's kind of obsession or fascination with death
Mm.
and killing animals at a young age and watching them die.
So he was more
So,
akin to a serial killer than he was,
yes.
a veteran with PTSD.
Yeah, so a lot of his behavioral markings are very psychologically similar to the starting of a serial killer.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So we went through and we interviewed everybody under the sun. Any interviews that we did were put into the timeline, jail phone calls, jail mail,
Mhm.
all of that. And jail phone calls are very time consuming, very time consuming. But sometimes you get some real good nuggets, and
Yeah.
we got some fantastic pieces of information and conversations that were had that gave us good investigative leads, and then also was easy to use in trial
Mm.
because he talked about his fame, and then he wanted to know um, one particular phone call he was talking about. He had a court appearance that we were
Mhm.
all at court for that day, and
Mhm.
so there's certain things that as an investigator are going to trigger conversation with
Mhm.
suspects. Court day is usually one of them, and they want to see what's said at court, and then they talk about it, and a lot of times they'll say, well, that didn't happen, so that's
Mhm.
a key time to listen.
Mhm.
So we were listening to that, and he was talking about the sheriff's office moving him through town to go to the courthouse, from the jail to the courthouse. And he's like, they rolled out the red carpet for me. And he was like fascinated by feeling like a hot shot getting police escort and having the road shut down and everything. Because we had to take serious precautions to get him safely from one place to the other because of what he had done and the outrage that there was. So his phone calls gave us a lot of insight into his personality,
Mhm.
into his motive. Um, he was mad that they didn't talk to him a lot on the way down to the gun range that day. He was mad that they ordered for him. They stopped at a Whataburger to get a meal before they went, and he was mad
Mhm.
that they just ordered for him, like that set him off. But then learned that he was actually, before Chris and Chad picked him up that morning, he was with his uncle, and they were drinking alcohol very early in the morning and doing drugs, and the drugs were laced. So one of the interviews, we had to track down the drug dealer and figure out what was going on there and how frequently, because some of what his psychosis was showing was that it was actually drug induced, and that's what came out with the forensic psychology interviews that occurred and that came out trial,
Mm.
because it was not actual PTSD. We were able to work with the VA, and part of our role as NCIS was to liaison with the VA and get his records. It came out that he did not have PTSD. He was
Wow.
awarded 100% PTSD after the homicides. So I guess they figured if you kill two people, it's, whatever narrative put out, he got rubber stamped and got a large back payment.
Yeah.
The phone calls that we were monitoring revealed that his family used the back payment, some of it, for a new recreational vehicle, an RV, and
Mhm.
the sister used some of it for a down payment on her house.
Wow.
So, all while he's getting court appointed attorneys because he claims to be indigent.
So let's go back to when Chris Kyle met this guy. How did he come to meet this suspect?
So, it was at the school that Chris was dropping off his kids at and was in the drop off line. And the suspect's mother worked there and approached him and said, hey, my son's suffering from severe PTSD. Can you help him out? I know you do a lot of work with veterans. So Chris dropped his kids off at school and left, and then went back later and met with her. And they exchanged phone numbers, and that's how the suspect got in touch with Chris. And Chris would uh, call and talk to him, and then they made arrangements to go out to the gun range that day.
Mm.
And thinking, everybody questions why Chris took him to a range.
Yeah.
I'm not here to discuss what Chris decided and why he decided that, but I
Mhm.
will say that he knew that the suspect was a small arms repairman and had a comfort in weaponry and
Yep.
grew up hunting. And so he, trying to help, thought, let's put him in a topic or a subject or an activity that he's comfortable with.
Yeah.
And
Makes
so,
sense.
logically, I can see why they chose to go to the gun range that day.
Yeah. Well, as I understand, from just I've never read the book. I've just watched the movie,
Yeah.
and there are some issues with the movie, but that's not a concern today. But I, what I to me, it was like he's taking a fellow warfighter
Mhm.
to do something that a lot of guys like to do, go shoot, especially in Texas. So,
Oh, yeah.
um, I see no issues with that. In fact, as he explained, he's a small arms repairman. These
Yep.
guys, every one of those guys I've ever met are the kind of people that really love to just tinker with weapons. So
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense to me that he'd do that. So was this the first time they'd gone to the range together, or they had
Yes,
done?
it
Oh,
was.
wow, wow, interesting.
Yep. Yeah. So with the uncle, we knew the uncle was there that morning. And then the Ranger Briley and I interviewed the uncle numerous times.
Mhm.
The uncle gave different stories every time we talked to him. And
Wow.
then we learned that right after the suspect was arrested, the uncle overdosed and spent a lengthy hospital stay for mental illness and obviously his overdose. So we knew that there was more truth underlying there because you don't overdose um, if you're not severely affected or impacted by what happened. So we knew that there was more truth to what occurred and we just needed to get to the bottom of it.
Mhm.
So ultimately, what we ended up doing, I don't remember the exact number of times we talked to him, 4 or 5. I ended up making what I called a truth chart, which I used on several cases if somebody was giving me a lot of conflicting information. So I made a chart that had all the major topics, major theme lines of the investigation, and
Mhm.
then everything they said the different times we talked to them. And I prefaced it when we got there and said, just to remind you, I'm a federal agent. 18 United States Code 1001 applies. That is lying by fact or omission,
Mhm.
and we need to get to the bottom of this. And so when it's staring them in the face and they're having to circle, each major theme, and you can see all the different lies, they
Mhm.
tend to become truthful pretty quickly after that.
Interesting. So you actually brought this chart in and showed it to him
Yeah, I sat down
in the
with them, flipped
interrogation.
it around. I On top of it was 18 USC 1001, and I read
Mhm.
it with them so that he fully understood it and couldn't come back later and say, "Well, I didn't know." And then
Mhm.
took that off. I had him sign and acknowledge it. Took that off, had the truth chart there, and I said, "All right, we're gonna go by one, and you're gonna tell me which one of these. So you said A, B, C, and D
Mhm.
for this theme.
Yeah.
Which one actually happened?" And then
Mhm.
I made him circle it, initial it, and we went through the whole chart that way. And then I had him do another sworn statement. Now, every time we talked to him, because we knew he was key, I always
Mhm.
swore him to statements.
Yeah.
So we had all these sworn statements that were contradictory.
So did
So then
that
the
did
truth
that cause
chart,
any problems in the trial with the
shockingly, no, because then the truth chart came out. So
very good.
funny with trial, I was under subpoena the whole time,
Mhm.
did not end up having to testify because if I was going to testify, it was going to be because he lied on the stand and perjured himself.
Yeah.
um they did question him and they kept calling me the Navy lady, which I thought was funny.
That's so
And he's
funny.
like, "Yeah, I talked to her and
The
you
Navy
gave her
lady.
numerous sworn statements." He's like, "Yeah, I did."
Oh my
And
gosh, that's so
he
funny.
came clean on the stand, so it was not a big issue um as far as the multiple sworn
That
statements.
truth chart's a really good idea for any agent out there that's watching this right now. There are certain, I've seen this before. I saw an agent do it at Camp Pendleton. They were working on a death of a baby, and they had
Yep.
kind of a truth chart where all the information, witness statements, stuff like this, and it was used effectively, much like this case, to get confession. So that's really good
Yeah,
work.
and
That's really good investigative
interesting on the
work.
true charts. We had all the major themes, and then every time he spoke, and then we
Mhm.
had one column um, that was investigative theory. So
Mhm.
Ranger Briley and I went over like possibilities of what might have occurred, and that some gray areas we still needed to flush out. And so we put them
Mhm.
on the chart, and lo and behold, one of those involved additional drug usage because we knew that he was drinking and using drugs in the morning, and Ranger Briley talked to him that night late, I believe, after the chase ensued and after he was taken in. It was around 10 o'clock at night, maybe
Mhm.
11 o'clock. It was late.
Yeah.
And in the interview, Ranger Briley notes and comments on his eyes. and how they looked to him to
Hmm.
be under the influence. And so we knew that what he used in the morning probably wouldn't still be as prominent in the evening. So we knew that there was something else that was taken or done during the day.
Yeah.
And after we did the truth chart and he circled that investigative theory, then we went back one other time and interviewed him. And in that interview is when we got the Holy Grail. He, the uncle told us that the suspect after the killing had fled and went to and stopped at his house, which we suspected,
Hmm.
and said that the suspect told him, "I'm in a dead man's truck." So if you're insane and you're claiming insanity, you're not going to essentially confess to a family
Yeah.
member.
Yeah.
And then we learned that he had one of the weapons that he had used. He took it with him, and
Mhm.
it was one of Chris's pistols that had some insignia engraved on it. And the suspect took it basically as a souvenir,
Yeah.
again, along the psychological profile of keeping
Yeah.
souvenirs.
Yep.
And he also told his uncle at one point he had a new truck
Yeah.
and he was driving Chris's truck.
You talked about
So,
earlier that he was under the influence of marijuana, was laced with another drug, as
yes,
well as alcohol. What was the other drug that was laced with that was
they were calling it Purple Hearts.
Purple Hearts?
Purple
Interesting.
Hearts.
What is Purple Hearts?
So, what we discovered, we couldn't get the full everything that was cut in it.
Hmm.
But what we discovered with the drug dealer that we interviewed was a lot of formaldehyde.
Really interesting.
Yep.
Kind of effects did that do to somebody? I've been out of narcotics a long time, so we just
Not
had the
good.
basic stuff back in those crystal meth and
Yeah.
cocaine and heroin.
Yeah.
That was the three. But when I start hearing stuff like Purple Hearts, what the hell is that? It's
Yeah,
like,
well, that's pretty much what the first time we had really heard it. I think the Rangers might have heard it once or twice. That was
uh-huh.
the first time I had heard of Purple Hearts. I had heard of, obviously, when I was doing undercover work, all kinds of things because I was buying drugs undercover, but I
Yeah,
had never heard of Purple Hearts. And
interesting.
so, yeah,
Wow, that's interesting. So Chris goes at one time to the range, gets killed by this guy. What was it like um, working with the with Chris's family on interviews and conducting the investigation? Because that's part of the thing. We always talk to the family members.
yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah, we got to keep the family members up to date as much as possible. Obviously, it's an ongoing investigation. You can't tell
Mhm.
everything, but his family had our phone numbers, and I remember his dad had called and said, "Hey, can you look into this? Just it's on my mind. It's bothering me." And
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely, I will look into it and get back with you on it because
Mhm.
that we had very open communication with them. If you have any questions, if there's something that's bothering you, just ask, and
Mhm.
we'll run it aground and go forward with
Mhm.
it. And great working relationship with them. On a side note, in honor of Chris, they started a foundation called the American Valor Foundation, and every year they put on the Chris Kyle Memorial Benefit. They help veterans and first responders. So if
Mhm.
anybody's looking for a great cause to stand behind, I definitely recommend that. There's so many others out there, just from my own experiences and things that I went through that I know about. But I do want to give them that
Well, that's great
opportunity on
stuff.
here that they
It's
do
great that the
honor
family is
Chris.
as terrible as that death is, that it's created a legacy that's helped so many others,
Yeah.
and that's tremendous.
Yeah, they're very selfless. They're extremely giving of not only their time, but of
Mhm.
resources and trying to put people and connect them with other organizations. If somebody has a specific need, they're very, very open and willing to try to get them any help that they need, any resources that they need. Um, Jeff, which is Chris's brother, is currently a police officer. I'm not going to put where he is just for
Yeah,
his safety and
sure.
privacy, but he is now selflessly serving as a police officer, and he was Special Forces Marines. He was a recon Marine
Recon
previously.
Marine, awesome.
Yep. So they're go-getters, and they have a huge heart for helping veterans and first responders.
Yeah, talk about some of the challenges you had with the investigation, because we all know that um, sometimes you only get one opportunity with a suspect in the
Yes.
interrogation room. So
Yeah.
talk about some of the challenges that you and the ranger had to go through.
Luckily, the suspect was a chatty Cathy, so we
He liked
had,
the fame.
yeah, he loved the fame, so he was very vocal on the phone. Um, a lot of mail that he was getting, and he would like draw pictures, and obviously we're looking for hidden messages in mail, but we're also looking to see just what the content is.
Mhm.
And I remember some of the content was alluding to there being more mail and photos that were being sent
Mhm. Mhm.
by his girlfriend and others that we weren't getting copies of. And so I arranged with the jail to come down and for them to take him out of his cell because he was in segregation. He was in a private cell,
Yeah.
obviously, because of what
Yeah.
happened. So I arranged for them to take him out to the yard and I went down and tossed his jail cell. And so they took me in, closed the door, and I'm in there going through everything because he had mail hidden and different things. So it took a while to find everything, and I knew what I already had received, and then I was
Mhm.
looking for anything that I had not seen before.
Yeah.
So I was in there for quite a while, and I remember obviously he's got a camera in his cell, and then I hear the yard door open, and I hear him say, "Are they done? We're bringing him back in. What do we do?" And I'm standing there waving at the camera like I'm still in here. Do not bring him back. I was so nervous that they were going to unlock the door and whip it open, and I'm
Mhm.
standing there. So luckily that didn't happen. They took him back out. But yeah.
So was this the prison down in Huntsville? Was he down in Huntsville, Texas, in
No, he was
that
held at
area?
the local Erath County jail
Okay.
during
Okay.
trial. And then once he was convicted and sentenced, he is now at the Ramsey 1 unit,
Ramsey 1 unit. Is that
which
in
is,
that is that in that's in Texas, right?
it is. It's part of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. TDCJ has units all throughout the state.
Yeah.
He is in one of the units down by Houston.
Oh, very good. So you've become very close to Kyle's family, obviously,
Yes.
because I mean, and this happens with a lot of our cases that you work with the family so closely that you continue talking to them way after you've retired and staying close to them. So talk about that a
Yep.
little bit and what that's meant to you.
It's been tremendous for me, not only with Chris's family, but also with Chad's family.
Mhm.
I know that they have been concerned about Chad being forgotten. And
Yeah.
so just for them to know that they aren't forgotten,
Hmm.
birthdays, anniversaries, stuff like that, I still stay in touch with them just to let them know, as the investigators, we didn't forget about the victims and that those are the types of cases that you don't have very often, but they really touch you down deep.
Yeah.
Um, it's meant a lot just to see that somebody has gone through so much grief and so much trial and so much heartache and in such a public spotlight
Hmm.
is still so humble and kind and giving of their time and just the graciousness that they exude to the public in general. When everybody tries to hang on coattails, I mean, you see it all over. Well, I know this
Hmm.
family, I know that family, because they're just trying to cling to fame. And a lot of the Texas Rangers and I are still very close with both families, and it's important for us to make sure that they don't feel forgotten.
Yeah, that's great. And so, great opportunity to work with Texas Rangers. Great case that you
Yep.
guys got a conviction, and he's got life without parole. Is that right?
Yeah, so the trial started on February 11th, 2015,
Hmm.
which was ironically Chad's birthday.
Okay.
So, yep, it started on his birthday and it went through till February 24th, 2015.
Hmm.
And deliberation, they broke for deliberations in the evening. It was just under 3 hours before we had a verdict. Of that
Hmm.
time, they took a dinner break and elected a foreman and then had deliberations. So it was a very fast verdict.
Wow.
Um, Obviously, it was a media circus.
I can
Everybody
imagine.
was covering it. The courthouse was just crawling with media.
Hmm.
We had assigned seats for the verdict. So we had
Hmm.
certain family members of the victims' families that we were assigned to.
Hmm.
One, just to keep them safe, and two, to keep the media from getting in their face to get the reactions right as it was read. We did have
Yeah.
media trying to take our seats, and we had to,
Get out of my CPU.
yeah, we had to boot them quite
Yeah.
politely
Yeah.
to be outside. But yeah.
So what was that like? So did you obviously probably got approached by media. How did you handle that situation?
Avoided it like the plague.
Yeah,
I
good for you.
I was really good about avoiding cameras and was pretty stealthy. I didn't want to talk to the media
Yeah.
at all. Uh,
So did you let
I
Ranger
just deferred
Brawley
to the
handle all
Texas
that stuff?
Rangers.
Yeah,
I
Texas
did. I was
Ranger.
like, Ranger
Yeah.
Briley can have at it. No, I deferred to the Texas Rangers because they had the lead on the investigation
Sure. Yeah.
as my out to try to
Yeah.
avoid it.
Yeah. Good for you.
So there's no shame in my game.
Hey, hey, man, I've always said that standing in the shadows is sometimes the most, advantageous position to be in. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I
well,
knew where the
cool. That is a.
cameras were and tried to avoid it.
So, tell me more about the suspect. And we're not going to make. I don't want to add to his fame and everything, but he claimed he had PTSD. You said that they paid his benefits after
Hmm.
this homicide. What was when you guys sat down in the interrogation room, and he obviously sounded like he was very cooperative, which is really interesting. Did you have a psychological profile that you used before you went into his prepare for his interrogation?
So Ranger Briley did the interrogation that night.
Okay.
I wasn't there because I went on back to duty yet until May or to March.
Okay.
But Ranger Briley went in, and obviously, as a Texas Ranger, they're very well versed in homicide investigations and
Hmm.
very heinous and violent crimes. So he kind of had a general ballpark idea of what he was going in for. We He had already listened to the 911 call and kind of knew what was
Hmm.
being said with he was psychotic and he was having psychosis and all this stuff. So he kind
Yeah.
of already had that ballpark. Now, later on with the calls and the jail mail and the interviews with the uncle and a lot of the other things is what we were able to use when we met with the forensic psychologist and
Hmm.
psychiatrist before they went and interviewed him. So
Okay.
prosecution had two experts go in and defense had one expert go in.
Hmm.
And so we were able to give them all the key details that we found during the investigation for them to use to build their profile and to do
Yeah.
their forensic interrogation or interview of the suspect,
Hmm.
which is what was revealed that he did not have PTSD. And it came out in court that it was drug induced psychosis.
Yeah. Because I know that a lot of processes when you're getting ready for a big interrogation like that. This obviously, with all the media attention, with all the DoD
Yeah.
interest or Department of Navy interest anyway, I can I know that when we prepare for these interrogations, there's a lot that goes into them before you walk in
Yeah.
that door. You just don't go in there shoot from the hip because,
Yeah. You
like we
usually have the
said,
answers before you go in.
exactly. You bet you have to be prepared, knowing your kind of your strategy on how you're handling this interrogation. And I'm sure the Texas Rangers did a fantastic job. They probably have all the units that we talked about, the psychological, and you said that they prepared this profile of this particular individual, which is not
Well, and plus,
unlike
when
a
you
lot of
work so
cases
many
like,
homicides, you
yeah,
learn general human psychology and kind of like what makes that brain tick.
yeah. And it's funny because I love to watch. There's a YouTube channel, Psychological, and they do a lot of cop interviews.
Yeah.
And anybody's out there that should watch it. It's really good because you see some really good techniques that police officers, detectives, rangers, special agents use when they're talking to somebody who's committed a heinous act of murder or rape. And it's really, really interesting to watch some of these interrogations that are kind of on this psychology channel. But
Hmm.
you made a great point. I mean, the, you have to be prepared for these interviews. You go in, you got this one chance, and the feeling when you come out of an interrogation like this, I'm sure that Ranger Brawley is Brawley, right?
Riley.
Briley, okay, Ranger Briley. When he came out of this, you got to feel good because you got to really. This guy is obviously tied to fame, and I've seen where you'll use that to your advantage when you go into these interviews with these guys, and use that
Yeah.
against them. So.
One, what Ranger Briley was really good at is, and I know in interviews and interrogations, I was not as good at this because
Mm.
I would just make mental notes and I would always write it up in my write ups. But
Yeah.
Ranger Briley would call out things like, "Is that blood on your shoe? Blood on your boots?
Oh
Why are you
wow.
looking at your boots?"
Yeah.
And so he would call it out. And for some odd reason that the video feed went down, it was still captured on audio.
That's
And
great.
as an investigator, I would just make note of it. Like when we
Yeah.
would interview different people, I always made notes and detailed in my report what their nonverbal behavior was. You know, if there
Yeah.
was a lot of toe tapping, if they were shifting a lot, if it was a lot of nervous and anxious behavior.
Mhm.
So I would actually mark down all the nonverbals in my report, and Ranger Briley was good about calling it out in the moment.
Mhm. Well, that is interesting. So, um, what about any other witnesses that you guys had to locate? You talked about this drug dealer. How did you guys
Yep.
locate this drug dealer? That had to be okay. First of all, is he you're going to find him? Is he going to talk to you at all?
Yeah. Well, funny story with that is he thought he was going on a date and picked where he wanted me to take him.
Uh-huh.
And
What did you find him on some
we
like online deal or something? How did you
no,
guys?
so we had his first name,
Uh-huh.
and this is real similar to the homeless neighbor.
Yeah.
We had a first name, and we knew generally kind of what he looked like, and we
Uh-huh.
just beat feet around the neighborhood till we found him.
Oh wow.
So
You're not
Ranger
the
Briley and I interviewed the drug dealer together a
Mhm.
couple of times, and then I interviewed him once separatally. Yeah, and
Interesting.
that's the time that he thought he was going on a date with just me, and I had we had a Navy reservist in the office. I was like, "Hey,
Uh-huh.
what are you doing tonight?" I was like, "You're coming with me. We're going to dinner."
Oh my gosh.
So
So how
he
did
got
that
to
dinner go?
experience that one.
What was the conversation like at that dinner?
It was basically we took him out. It was right around April 20th, so
Hmm.
420.
Hmm.
And that's how we got into it, that his activism with the 420 group, and kind of uh, how he got into drugs and what are the benefits, and are there benefits, what's your stance on this, and just I did a lot of playing dumb and asking
Yeah.
people to educate me. It was
Yeah.
a investigative technique that worked great for me. And so I
Yep.
would say, "Well, I don't really understand. Can you explain it more to me?"
Yeah.
And so if people thought that they were teaching you something and that they knew more than you,
Hmm.
they tended to be more of an open book and would spill their guts. And so that's how I
Make
got a
them
lot
the
of my
interest.
info.
Yeah. Make them the interest of the interview. So
Yep. So it
that's
worked
good
out well for
stuff,
me.
Amanda. That is good stuff. I mean, so so you had the drug dealer, then you had the homeless guy.
Yeah.
So talk about finding this homeless guy. You went to the homeless shelters. What did you have to do?
Yeah. Well, we went to numerous homeless shelters all around the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex.
Hmm.
And we kept getting word that, "Oh, yeah, I know that guy." And by then I had him fully identified. So I'd gotten a picture of him. And so we would go into the front desk. I'm like, "Hey, does he sleep here at night? Have you ever seen him?" And then we got it tracked down to the guy was bouncing between three homeless shelters in Dallas.
Hmm.
And they were all male homeless shelters. So whenever I would go, I would take the reservist with me. So I wasn't showing up by myself,
Yeah.
and just go beat feet until I got him and pinned him down. Luckily, on one night, I found him at the right homeless shelter. So when we would go and I tried to find him, we would hit all the ones that I knew he was frequenting on that same night, just
Right.
to see if I could catch him. Finally got him and talked to him, and he's the one that gave us a lot of information about killing animals and watching them take their last breath. So
Mhm. Wow.
yeah,
Interesting.
and it was in line with information kind of that we previously had. So obviously you have to worry about with the crowd that you're interviewing, are they under the influence, are they mentally
Hmm.
stable, are they of sound mind when they're doing the interview,
Sure.
because otherwise it's just good info to have but can't be useful.
Hmm.
And he was credible.
Was this guy a vet or
No,
was he wasn't?
nope, just
Interesting.
a neighbor, and got tied into drugs and alcohol at an early age and kind of went down a bad path.
Mm, that's interesting. So what an
And then we
what
had the movie
yeah.
come out on for wide distribution. I think the movie came out on January 16th, 2015, and trial
Hmm.
started on February 11th.
Hmm.
So that was a lot of um, gave us pause as far as, is it going to take the jury pool? Is it
Yeah.
um, enough that the movie's one thing, but doesn't really affect the trial, and how are people going to be influenced by it, and then the
Yeah.
media coverage. So it was a lot of um, moving parts right at the end.
Sure. Interesting. So it comes out in a movie. Obviously, Um, and the interesting thing that I found out about this is that, um, you know, there are certain aspects we can't talk about today, um, and we're not going to talk about. But I will say this: the 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 connection you have with the family, with Chris Kyle's family and Chad Littlefield's family, is something that every agent out there can learn from. As far as, I mean, because I mean, you obviously become very close with the families. That's how intimate the relationship can be between an agent out there doing their job that's doing it well and a family that's lost a loved one. And
Yep.
that's credit to you, that you have that relationship with both those families. But at the same time, key here is, you work very closely with Texas Rangers, which our agents do on a daily basis. They work with local, state, federal, other partners, here, overseas. And
Yeah.
you've done that your whole career. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, when you were in Madagascar, you worked with the police there, and that's one of the
Yeah.
things. The benefits we have as NCIS agents is that we get the opportunity to work with so many law enforcement partners, and what a great experience that is.
Yeah, it's fantastic to be able to learn new techniques from
Mhm.
everybody that you work with. Everybody investigates a little bit differently. So you take what works and what you like,
Mhm.
and hijack it for your own toolbox. And it makes you a better investigator in the long run. Um, but yeah, just everybody I've worked with has been fantastic,
Yeah.
around the world, whether it's the Texas Rangers or the French Gendarmerie or the local Malagasy officials in Bahrain,
Mhm.
Oman, wherever I went, it was a unique experience, and everybody's got the brotherhood of and sisterhood of law enforcement. So
Yep. You learn these techniques working with our law enforcement partners around the world. I mean, there are
yeah,
some techniques you don't want to use, like I've seen the Turkish National Police use. So um,
yeah.
there are some you use and there's some you don't use. So
Yeah,
it's all
I
good.
learned some of the definite do nots from the Kenyan police. I was like, "Whoa, yeah,
It's
can't
kind of like,
witness
whoa,
that."
yeah, I
Yeah,
can't.
hands off.
You guys do what you got to do. I'm going to walk out of here now.
Yeah,
So
that's in your playbook, not in mine. Gotta go.
good stuff. Well, Amanda, listen, it's great talking to you. What a great
Likewise.
case that was. And let's keep in touch once again. I hope that we can, we've talked about in our last show, about what we can do to help you push legislation through to get treatment for all civilians that serve in contingency areas and war zones. So let's hope that we can push that through.
Yeah, I'm definitely praying that God will align everything right and we can get it pushed through because it's impactful for so many DoD civilian special agents that do answer the call and serve forward deployed. And I think it's critical that we don't wait till 20, 30 years down the road and have like an Agent Orange issue come up where we at least have it covered and everything's documented
Yeah,
pretty close in time.
for so many of those in the Vietnam War who served then, it was too late for them to get help,
Exactly.
because it was so long, too many years later. So, thank you, thank you, thank you for what you do on a daily basis. You continue to serve, even though you're not carrying the badge anymore. You continue to serve, and we appreciate the service that you've given us today.
I appreciate you having me on here and being an advocate and a supporter of helping to push this forward. And I really appreciate not only your time, but your effort and your camaraderie.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Ciao.